what have you found is the most difficult thing, or one of the most difficult things to get across to students, and why do you think that is?
Well, one of the things we fight is martial art movies. Now, I love a good martial art movie. I mean, they're compelling. They emotionally grab you. I'm a big fan of the movies, and I always have been. But I have to say that things that happen in the movies may not reflect reality. So, I've seen movies where people are kicked in the head over and over, and they get back up, and a little trickle of blood's there. Oh no, one good boot heel to the side of the temple. No, it's over. But people are used to that idea, oh man, this guy isn't going to go down. Movies are designed to evoke particular emotions. And same thing with like manga or comic book art. If you notice comic book art, they'll have a superhero, like the fingers are touched, and it's this way. And now when I do it, it looks ridiculous. But if this were comic book art, no, that would look cool and edgy. And if we try to be like a comic book figure, it's kind of funny, but people are influenced by that. And in a movie, people are, kind of upper body forward, and people watch that in a movie, and this really influences. And then we get back into the dojo and we say, what's really going to happen in a real fight? You project your head like that. What's the closest thing to my attacker? My eyes. Oh God, that'd be like the last thing I want to have hanging out.
Yeah, sure.
In an attacker, because he's gonna jab me in the eyes. So I keep my head back. I keep this shoulder up. So that doesn't fit the movies. So I would say, entertainment. As much as I love it, people are wired up. So I get hit in the solar plexus, and the wire catches, and I go flying back into the wall. And yeah, but if you hit somebody in the solar plexus, they pitch forward. They don't fly backward. People are, kind of victim if they think this is how it's going to be in a real fight. In for a big awakening.
Yes, sir. Could you tell us a little bit more about the spiritual development part of the training that you offer at the through To-Shin and specifically through the Blue Lotus Assembly?
It's a long story.
Okay.
I'll try to make it short. I even as a tiny child, I was very interested in spiritual topics, and growing up in Delaware and Ohio in the 40s and 50s, it was kind of a little white church on the corner was the only answer. And so I went there, and I had a lot of questions, and I got involved. I was like the minister's helper. I had a little robe and everything, and I'd help the minister, and I had so many questions and talks, and basically I didn't find the answers that I needed and that I was looking for. And I don't think the questions I had were the normal questions that a parishioner would ask. And the ministers that I talked to, I mean, they did their best, and they would finally tell me, a lot of these questions don't have real answers that we know. It's up to you, your faith and what you believe and what you think works best. And I was a little surprised. Now I realized it was a brilliant answer. I was kind of let go and go out into the world. And so I have had this spiritual journey that I haven't really talked about a whole lot. Most people know me as a martial artist. So at the same time, I was studying martial arts, Tang Sudo, was a very important stepping stone. I mean, it was a stepping stone. A lot of my questions that grew up, Tang Sudo really couldn't handle. And so those teachers said, well, you'd probably have to go somewhere else to find those answers. And so I did, and went through the Bujinkan. Boy, did that open my eyes up. But after a while, I realized, we're studying 1500s Japanese defense, different culture, different laws, different clothing, different purposes. And a lot of my questions, my teacher finally said, we don't really deal with that stuff. You'd need to go somewhere else to find those answers. So Bujinkan was a stepping stone on my way to developing To-Shin. And these kind of moved, these two forces moved, and somewhere in the 80s I realized I had kind of compartmentalized these, and my reaction to confrontation, a little warlike. And there was a very specific story where a person had sent somebody to kill me, believe it or not. Actually, two people were sent to kill me, and I realized, number one, I couldn't afford the security I needed. I mean, like back in the 80s, maybe you weren't even born then, but in the 80s, oh man, this ninja thing was huge. It was on all the magazines, and the books sold like crazy, and there were resentful people. People resented me, and so I looked at that, and my warlike response, I caught myself. I said, I'm becoming something I didn't really set out to be. And 85, I made up my mind. I really need to balance this out. And so I went back to my spiritual question, and I said, who would be the most, effective? What would be the best teacher? Well, of course, like the Dalai Lama. But I mean, realistically, who would be the guy I'd want to see? Now, within a year, I'd met the Dalai Lama. And by a miracle, he ended up coming to where I was, and we developed a relationship. And so really that spiritual evolution, along with my martial evolution, just met there in 85. And it affected, in 95, when we started To-Shin, it really affected what I teach. And I think it's important. It's an option, but just like To-Shin is very unstylized. It's not a thing like this or this or this. It's very natural. We strip away, not pretense, but artificial form. We strip it away to where it's just the basic movements. That's an important part of To-Shin. Same thing with our spiritual training. We strip away, Tibetanness or Japaneseness, and we really get right down to what is the significance? What is the obligation? What is the process of being fully human, fully contributing, fully participating as a human being on the earth? So I'm looking at that. And then when things go bad, I'm looking at that, and they dovetail.
Short of the massive amount of translation work which you've done on both Tibetan and Japanese texts, what do you feel beyond what you just answered is sort of your contribution to a spiritual journey or a spiritual study that somebody could go through To-Shin, through the Blue Lotus Assembly?
Interesting question. I think, like with our To-Shin, we've stripped it of stylization, of regional or country identification. It's really pure minimal movement, maximum results. Same thing with the spiritual stuff. I've worked pretty diligently to create a series of processes that people could go through. They could be Christian, they could be Jewish, they could be atheist. You don't really have to like put on any identity, but these things run in a very deep current beneath the popular religious forms. I know my culture well enough, and I know that other ancient culture well enough that I can find the value in there. And now, all that said, I think the simplest answer is I use very straightforward language to translate, and that is not the norm in the academic Tibetan English, Japanese English. There are all these code words that are used that really confuse things, and my translations use the vernacular. I like to think that's what I'm doing.